Okay, so today's topic is evaluating functions. It's basically just the algebra of functions. You're plugging numbers into different functions and finding a result. So you will be successful when you can evaluate any function I throw at you. You can do it. And evaluate just means plug and chug. You're doing like pre-algebra work here. Okay? Don't forget your homework is 2 through 10 evens. Here we go. So in the first problem, I've given you the function f of x equals x squared minus x plus 3, and I've asked you to find the function of a 3. So just a couple of reminders here. Remember that this really means what? Y. Okay, so y equals x squared, then this is a quadratic, it'll graph a parabola. All right, so here's how I want you to write your notation. The f of 3 is equal to, first, remove all of the x's and replace them with parentheses. I'm going to ask that you do this on your tests, and not because I don't think that you can do a lot of this math in your head, but it does help to avoid silly errors like dropping a negative or multiplying a negative times a negative when you're not supposed to do that. So let's be clear about that. Now we'll insert the 3. I see you. Just a second. Okay, what's your question? Oh, thank you. I'll fix that up right now. All right, so here we have a couple of different operations that you have to contend with. You've got a power, a subtraction, and an addition. So to simplify this properly, you have to follow the order of operations that says powers come before addition and subtraction, as you well know. So 3 squared equals 9. And negative 3 plus 3, well, I think we could probably just cancel those out because they cancel each other out. So here's how I'd like to see your answer. The f of 3 is equal to 9. So here's your solution, 9. But this is an optional thing to write down. I don't want my highlighter. We plugged in a 3 and we got out a 9. Now, I'm not asking you to write your homework or do this in your homework. This is an extra thing. Just wanting you to connect it to the coordinates that it represents, because later we will be graphing these. Okay? So always connecting it to its purpose, which would be to graph it. Okay, here we go, number 2. So now we're just plugging in a 0. Same process. I open up my parentheses because I just don't want to make any errors, and remove all my x's, and then I go with my other color and I insert what I want to replace my x with, which would be zeros. We know this. Let's not be too bored. Following the order of operations, 0 squared is 0, minus 0 is 0, plus 3 is 3. And so we could say that the f of 0 equals 3. So 3 is our solution. And then if we took it a step further, we could say that that is the corresponding point if we were to graph it. Moving on. We're still reviewing things we already know. Let's plug in the f of negative 2. Now here's where it becomes really important to open up those sets of parentheses when we remove our x, because we're plugging in a negative, and sometimes if we're not careful, we'll mess it up. So we're inserting a negative 2, inserting a negative 2, and following our order of operations. So negative 2 squared happens first. That's 4. Minus negative 2 is plus 2, because you're multiplying negative 1 times negative 2 is 2, plus 3. Then we'll simplify that down all the way to 9. So the f of negative 2 is 9. Now that's interesting because we're still working on the same quadratic equation. And do you remember the other answer that we got that was 9? 3, 9. So if I were graphing this parabola now, here's what I know. Negative 2, 9. You don't have to graph this. And 3, 9 are 2 points that are on this parabola that probably does something like that. Pretend I got that arrow in the right spot. There we go. Okay, so we know it does something like that, which is pretty interesting, and we're connecting it to its function on the coordinate plane. Let me highlight my answer. Maybe we're not cooperating right now. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to start plugging in alphabet. From now on, we're plugging in the alphabet, and so now we really have to know our rules. This is not difficult, by the way. I did it again. Oh, you're so funny. Okay. All I'm doing in this one is replacing an X with an A. So let's think about that. I could be pretty picky and go, okay, so that's A squared minus an A plus a 3. But do you feel like I really needed to do the whole inserting? Since I wasn't really evaluating a number, I could just have replaced the X's with A's like so and been done with that one. And hang on to that because you know we're going to need that answer later. We're going to find the f of a another couple times. All right. Next, the f of negative a. Now, do you think it's important for me to use my parentheses? Again with the not changing pens. All right, so I'm going to open up my parentheses and remove my x's. Plus 3. Man, this is really not cooperating today. I think I need to turn my mirroring thing off. Inserting my negative a. And I'm going to pause for a moment. So let's simplify that. Do that with my black pen. So negative a squared. You know that's negative 1 times negative 1, which is positive 1, and a times a is a squared. And then negative a, or minus a negative a, is plus an a, plus 3. Therefore, the f of negative a is equal to a squared plus a plus 3. Really important that you're using those parentheses. Okay, yes. You can't add them because they're not like terms. All right. Now I think things are starting to get tricky. And at this point, you might start feeling a little bit uncomfortable, and probably mostly because of that negative f of a. So remember what this really stood for? This? Y. So you know what that stands for? A negative y. That's what that stands for. So off in the left-hand side of your notes, if you wanted to, we could just make a sample problem. If my problem said negative y equals x squared minus x plus 3, I'm going to erase this in a minute. What would you do to solve for y? That's exactly what you would do. Divide everything by negative 1. So you would get y equals negative x squared plus x minus 3. So this is the same thing. Don't let this negative throw you off, but let's alert. Let's alert on that. And I'm going to erase this and get it out of the way. So I think I'm going to put it in red pen here. Alert. That's a negative y. That's all it is. It's a negative y. So don't let it throw you for a loop. So let's go ahead and write this out. Replacing all of our x's with a's. That would be a squared minus a plus 3, right? So here we have, I'm going to rewrite it because my alert's in the way. You don't have to rewrite it because you're probably fine. A squared minus a plus 3. I want to get rid of that negative, so what I'm going to do is divide by negative 1. And it's okay if I do it all at once, right? Remember my camel hump? Could just show it all some love with an extra little hump in my heart. All right, that sounded weird on video for people who don't know what I'm talking about. Enjoy. All right, and done. There you go. Maybe they will, maybe they don't. You know what I'll do? I'll just draw a heart with an extra hump so they understand what I'm talking about, so I don't get fired for saying something weird. There's my heart with an extra hump. There it is. Okay. All right, moving on. Okay. So here we have a binomial and some more alphabet soup going on here. So we have to be really careful here. Here's where I'm going to start seeing a separation from my people that get A's and my people that get B's and C's and D's. And it's going to be the separation of the A students and everybody else. So if you want to be an A student, pay attention. All right, so first we're going to go ahead and open up our parentheses and remove our X's. But now I'm going to make a little more room because I'm going to replace my X with a binomial. So just thinking ahead, plus 3. And then I'm going to insert my A plus H for all of my X's. And here's where we have to pay attention. Here, let's alert on that. Okay? Here's going to be the difference. Some people are going to multiply A plus H times A plus H. And that's what you're supposed to do. And some people are going to do this very bad thing. Watch. Watch. Distribute that power. You are not allowed to distribute powers over the top of addition signs or subtraction signs. That's bad math. That's not how we do things. We don't do that. So don't do that. Don't be that person. Fix it. So over here on this side, we're going to do A plus H quantity squared a couple times. So let's just write it off to the side so we have it. Ready? A plus H quantity squared means A plus H times itself. And then, of course, we're going to multiply that out. So we're going to distribute the A. A times A is A squared. And then, I'm going to go ahead and do my outer multiplication and my inner multiplication because it's just a double A times H. AH plus AH is 2 AHs. And then I'll do my last multiplication, my outside multiplication there, plus H squared. So A plus H quantity squared is A squared plus 2AH plus H squared. Okay? Don't mess it up. Here we go. So we're going to replace this with A squared plus 2AH plus H squared. And then that takes care of the quantity squared. We're going to distribute this negative, or it's a -1, It's just an invisible one, but there it is. So that's negative A minus H plus 3. Then, of course, we look to see if we can combine any of those terms. I don't see any other A squareds. I don't see any other AHs or any more H squareds, any A's. We're done. So the F of A plus H is, we won't write this as a coordinate because that's just silly. We're not graphing that. That would be awful. There you go. Okay, so hang on to that answer because we're going to need it again in a little bit. Here we go. Next problem. Is this the next problem? I feel like it's not. I feel like that's not it either. Did I skip a whole mess of them? It's that one. Ooh, I skipped it. Okay, here we go. So this one's a little different in that you have this function f of x, which is a quadratic, and down here you have an f of a plus an f of h. So you're adding this function times itself, but replacing the x's with a's and then replacing the x's with h's. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rewrite it because you probably have a little more. You don't have to rewrite it. You're good. I'm just going to rewrite it so that I can do this. So f of a is going to go right here. And I'm opening up, I'm replacing f of a with a trinomial. So I'm going to open up my set of parentheses, and then I'm going to open up another set of parentheses to put my other function in. So the f of a, we already did that. What's the f of a? A squared minus a plus 3. All right, so that's the f of a. Now I'm going to grab up my other color. Remember, I told you you might need another color. And I'm going to insert the f of x over here because I'm adding those two. So the f of h. So if I replace the x's with h's, that would be h squared minus h plus 3, and there you go. So that's all that's telling you to do. And now let's simplify. So this is an invisible one, so that's just a squared minus a plus 3. And this is also another invisible one right here. So that's plus h squared minus h plus 3. And I need to combine my 3's. So the f of a plus the f of h is equal to a squared minus a plus h squared minus h plus 6. And I don't really care about the order that you write it in. I'm not particular right now about that. As long as you have all the terms and they have the right symbols in front of them, the right signs, you're good to go. Okay, so that's it for the easy ones. And when I say easy, I meant more like simple. Now we're going to move on to the calculus problem. Okay, so what I see here is what we call the difference quotient. And you use like the derivative when you're working in calculus. So I'm going to not use my highlighter and not do that. Back up. Grab my pencil. All right, so we call this the difference quotient. Or for short, the DQ. It's the derivative. You use it often when you're trying to find the tangent of a curve, which we practiced yesterday. This is just an alternate way to work on it. So we use the difference quotient in calculus often, and since this is pre-calculus, we should practice. Wow, they pause. So here we go. This is just a little prep for calculus. Like I said, this is a pre-calculus class. Therefore, we should be prepping for calculus all the time. So I'm introducing the difference quotient. So it looks complicated, but you know what we've already done? We've already found the f of a plus h, haven't we? And we've already found the f of a, haven't we? So now we're just going to insert the answers to those two things in the numerator and subtract them over h. So it's not going to be as bad as it looks. Oh, I want my red pen. So I'm going to put that right there. What was my f of a plus h? Final answer. 2ah plus h squared minus a minus h plus 3. Okay, so that's my f of a plus h minus, now I'm going to plug in my f of a, which we already knew, but notice I'm using parentheses because I'm inserting a whole trinomial, and that would be a squared minus a plus 3. Go to sleep. Don't quit. All over h. You already did all this prep work, so when you're doing your homework tonight, don't work this out from the beginning. Pick up your answers because you've already answered a lot of these questions. Okay, so I think we really need to distribute that negative there. We're distributing a positive one here, so nobody cares about that very much. So that's a squared plus 2ah plus h squared minus a minus h plus 3 minus a squared plus a plus, nope, that's a minus. Back it up. Oh, that's too far. Oh, man. Minus a squared plus a minus 3 all over h. Now let's simplify that numerator right now. Can we cancel my a squareds? A squared minus a squared is no a squareds. Negative a and positive a is no a's. Positive 3 and negative 3 is no 3's. Notice what I have left in my numerator. A 2ah plus an h squared minus an h. And what do all three of those terms have in common? An h. So how about we factor that out as we rewrite it? Thinking as a mathematician, that would be h times 2a plus h times h minus h times 1, right? If I was to factor an h out of all three of those terms, all over h. And I did that because, you know what I want to cancel out of my denominator? That h. So final answer, The DQ, and I don't want to write the DQ, so I'm just going to use DQ. You can too. Is 2a plus h minus 1. Done. And I know it's not fun. Nothing about this lesson is fun, but it's crucially important. Just like learning your multiplication tables, it's important. Or important, depending on where you're from in the country. Last one, the beast. This is a different function. Yes? Different function. So we're going to have to do a little work. Shh, we're almost done. Here we go. So I am going to write the f of a plus h in the first position. So I'm going to put a bracket this time because I'm inserting parentheses inside this whole function. So that would be a -3. Remove the x and replace it with an a plus h. -7. Remove the x, replace it with an a plus h. Plus 2. That all represents the f of a plus h. Minus, I grab my blue pen now. We're going to do the f of a. So I'm opening up another bracket. -3. Remove the x, replace with an a. -7 times a plus 2 all over h. I know. I think I got to write smaller, but I don't think that this program lets me. It doesn't let me regroup and just make things smaller. Okay, so what should I do? I still have a lot of work to do in here, right? But I do know the answer to a plus h quantity squared, right? I know that. So that's -3 times a squared plus 2ah plus h squared. We know that, right? And then I could start working through this. I could distribute here. So -7a minus 7h plus 2. Okay, so that's my first group. Now, could I go ahead and distribute here and here and here? Yeah. So that would be plus 3a squared plus 7a plus 2. You agree? All over, hey, that was a pretty good line. Over h. Almost done. Come on, hang in there. What do I have to do now? Distribute it one more time. Yeah. What's the matter? Where's the negative? Oh, it is a -2. Good eye. Thanks. I appreciate that because I would want that to fix up, and it's doesn't want to erase. There we go. Something's going on with this board. Don't you crash before I'm done. All right, so -3a squared minus 6ah minus 3h squared. Now we got to rewrite all this stuff. -7a minus 7h plus 2 plus 3a squared plus 7a. We're almost done. Hang in there. You can do it all over. Come on. H. Let's cancel. Can we get rid of the -3a squared and the positive 3a squared and the -7a and the positive 7a and the positive 2 and the -2? And then let's look at, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to highlight what's left. What do they all have in common? An h. So let's factor out that h. So that would be h times -6a minus 3h minus 7. Close up parentheses. I'm out of room, so I'm really squeezing it in. All over h. Cancel the h because we're simplifying. And let's go to our last step. The DQ, that was the DQ again. That's the difference quotient, this guy up here. Sometimes they're x's, sometimes they're a's. And the answer is -6a minus 3h minus 7. So you have some pretty good examples of what you're going to be seeing in your homework. My expectation is that you do your homework on a separate sheet of paper and you label it 1.3a, 2 through 10 evens, no whining, or I'll add the odds. No whining. I know it's not fun, but you need the practice.